Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast, where you learn how to extract your business and personal deep wealth. I'm your host, Jeffrey Feldberg. This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth and the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience. When it comes to your business deep wealth, your exit or liquidity event is the most important financial decision of your life. But unfortunately, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Think about all that time and your hard-earned money wasted. Of the quote-unquote successful liquidity events, most business owners leave 50% to over 100% of the deal value in the buyer's pocket and don't even know it. I should know. I said no to a seven-figure offer and yes to mastering the art and the science of a liquidity event. 2 years later, I said yes to a different buyer with a 9-figure deal. Are you thinking about an exit or liquidity event? Don't become a statistic and make the fatal mistake of believing the skills that built your business are the same ones to sell it. After all, how can you master something you've never done before? Let the 90-Day Deep Wealth Experience and the 9-step roadmap of preparation help you capture the best deal instead of any deal. At the end of this episode, take a moment and hear from business owners like you who went through the Deep Wealth Experience. Jimmy St. Louis is an entrepreneur, competitive athlete, and businessman focused on innovating and changing the health and technology industries. Jimmy is currently an operating partner of Avon Capital, Franchise Accelerators, and the founder of Franchise 123 and AliRx. Jimmy is currently focusing on innovating and advancing the industry of franchising through a combination of technological advancements as well as new operational and team efficiencies. As the founder of Franchise 123, his focus is on creating simple and open market connections between franchise buyers and sellers to advance and improve the success of franchisees and franchisors. Formerly, Jimmy was the founder and CEO of Regenerative Medicine Solutions, a leading medical company with a focus on cellular therapy and a mission to treat the untreatable. Under RMS, Jimmy founded the Lung Health Institute and the Cognitive Health Institute, leading them both to success before recently merging with a publicly held company. Jimmy also previously served as the CEO of VIP Care Dental, as well as TLC RX. Jimmy's business career includes 5 years as COO as a managing partner of the Laser Spine Institute, an organization that grew from 9 employees to over 1,000 and had an annual revenue of over $200 million per year. Following LSI, Jimmy and his partners started Advanced Healthcare Partners, a healthcare management and consulting agencies for specialized medical services and technologies. From Advanced Healthcare Partners, Jimmy followed his passion for advancements in medicine and started Regenerative Medicine Solutions. RMS currently has 2 brands: the Lung Institute, now the world leader in cellular therapy for chronic lung disease, and the Cognitive Health Institute, which focuses on comprehensive alternative for treating brain-related disorders. In addition to his business endeavors, Jimmy played football professionally for the NFL's Tennessee Titans as a tight end, was a multi-sport athlete at Auburn University, and most recently was a member of the 2016 United States rowing team. His accomplishments include 4 national medals in the men's doubles, men's quad, men's pair, and men's 4, as well as a 3rd-place finish in the 2016 Olympic trials. As an early adopter of new procedures, medical treatments, and overall health, Jimmy is a lifelong advocate of a life dedicated to wellness. Welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast, and I have a terrific episode and guest lined up for you today. We have a fellow business owner who can actually talk with us all about liquidity events and building businesses and selling businesses. We're going to do a deep dive on some really exciting things that our guest Jimmy is working on. You heard it in the official introduction, but I'm going to put a zip on it right here because we have Jimmy with us in the person. So Jimmy, welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. A pleasure to have you with us. And I'm really curious, Jimmy, because there's always a story behind the story. So what's your story, Jimmy? What got you to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, Jeffrey, thanks for having me as well. I have been looking forward to the chance to be on here with you and have a good discussion. So one thing that I'm working on now, it's a company called AliRx. So the word Aliorium is food, and then RX, of course, is prescription. So we've launched essentially a food prescription business where we do a series of in-home health tests through stool and finger prick, so blood sample, to get detailed food analysis to tell you what type of food is good for you and what type of food is not. What's good for you may not be good for me. But what we've done more importantly is we've taken those test results and we've put them into a software that we've created that essentially creates a food prescription for you. Mm-hmm. So not only does it tell you here's the 75 things you should not eat and here's 100 things that you should, but we actually will put those together in recipes for you. Also working on partnerships with food delivery services and various grocery stores as well. So when you go into the stores, you know exactly what to get and you know exactly what you're buying and put it into your mouth that's good for your body.
Love that narrative. And Jimmy, for our listeners, and by the way, the question I'm going to ask, there's no disrespect whatsoever to the doctors or the medical profession. They are all doing the best that they can with the information that they have. And I know some listeners are saying, well, wait a minute, Jimmy, did I hear you say that food as a prescription? Because when I go to my doctor, I'm told I can eat whatever I want. It doesn't really make a difference. Yeah, maybe stay away from some of the sugary things, but otherwise go at it, and whatever has me feel good is what I should be eating. What's going on with that? What's the story behind the story on that one that our listeners should really know?
A little bit back to your first question, really to how I got here. And I think that can maybe help to understand the mindset of what went into what we've created here. Really have spent my career trying to solve problems, mostly in healthcare. So we may identify a need in healthcare, a consumer need, and what we call an unmet need in healthcare. And then we will either go and create protocols or research, maybe alternative science, and build a business around it to try to help people find potentially a better, faster, more efficient, or even healthier alternative to maybe some areas of traditional medicine that really may be in need of change. That we've done it, everything from spine surgery to COPD to sleep apnea. And now we're doing it in this field of gut health. And this field has been emerging over about the last 10 years. It's been an interesting field, and there hasn't really been a lot of physicians focusing on it. So our objective here is, how do you put the patient first? How do you create something that can be good and effective for the patient, and ultimately offer an alternative for them when they're working with their physicians? So in this business, this one's a little bit different than other ones that we may have attacked before. The other ones we may have attacked, we are creating true alternatives to the type of treatment. For example, utilizing a patient's own stem cells to help treat their lung disorders. And the alternative before was inhalers, oxygen tanks, or lung transplants. And although the inhalers and the oxygen tanks may have served as a little band-aid, most people don't want to have to proceed with a transplant, an organ transplant, unless you really have to. So we offered an interesting alternative there. This one's a little bit different because I think most physicians, if they're honest with themselves, they would admit they probably have not had a detailed amount of training in the field of nutrition. Of course, there's specialists out there, but your typical provider who may be specializing in treating an ailment, it's hard for them to argue that diet is not an effective way to at least get your body primed and in a healthier position to possibly undergo treatment maybe more successfully. So what we created, that food is medicine. We all eat, we all have to eat. So it makes sense for us to know exactly what we should be eating and utilizing food as medicine to potentially help heal some ailments that you may have, maybe even prevent some disease down the road. But more importantly, just put your body in a position where you're healthier, it's optimized, you're sleeping better, you're recovering better. And then the idea is your body is working for itself, not against itself.
Absolutely. And Jimmy, as you're talking about that, my mind is racing because we've had other world-class subject matter experts, scientists and doctors who have come onto the podcast. And the doctors in particular, to your point, they're sharing, when we get people in the right place, we can reverse things like type 2 diabetes. And even not eating right can lead to other kinds of things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and the list just goes on and on of these nasty kinds of things. So for the benefit of our listeners, Jimmy, what's going on with that when we're not eating right? Behind the scenes, what's happening in the body? And then once we get the scoop on that from you, I'd love to fast forward to how it works with your service. So why don't we start with some of the basics? I'm just eating whatever it's ironic, the standard American diet, which is sad. I'm eating the standard American diet. What's going on with me behind the scenes with the food?
Sure. So we believe, again, that food is medicine. And what we mean by that is it starts with what you put into your body. So you have to make sure that you're putting the right things into your body. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that this will be relatively consistent with what some other guests on your show may have said, but it's all a system. So
Mm-hmm.
from our perspective, health starts within your gut.
Mm-hmm.
And in your gut, you have healthy bacteria and unhealthy bacteria, or good bacteria and bad bacteria. And as there's an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, that bad bacteria begins to permeate the gut lining. So you may have heard the term leaky gut syndrome.
Sure.
Really, what's happening there is your gut is not in a healthy position. So it starts to leak, and it's leaking this kind of bad bacteria into your circulatory system.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, your body identifies that bad bacteria as something that doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
So it then starts to attack it. That attack is ultimately it's inflammation. Same thing as when you skin your knee. It's not actually the act of skinning the knee that hurts. It's actually the inflammatory process beginning, and that throbbing feeling that you get.
Mm-hmm.
That's your body starting to work for itself. So you actually should be concerned if you aren't in discomfort, because your body probably isn't working well for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So these agents begin to go and they begin to attack this bacteria in your body that causes inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for acute needs, inflammation is good. You go in there just like the skin knee. It goes in there, and those growth factors go there. They attack it. They begin to heal it. But when you get this chronic inflammation, this systemic chronic inflammation, where your body's constantly under attack, you just think about, I try to use the analogy, like if you had to walk to work every day and you walk through an alley and you had to get in just a little fist fight every time you were walking down the alley, you'd probably be tired when you walk into work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same thing that's actually happening here. Your body's in a constant fist fight with itself when this chronic inflammation is occurring. So when that happens, your body's tired, and it can start to then develop some disease state. Some of that disease state could be caused by environmental agents. It could be some type of genetic correlation. But oftentimes, if your body's working so well for itself, it will fight off those disease states. We see things like autoimmune diseases, like perhaps MS, lupus, certain neurodegenerative diseases like early onset Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment. Those things are actually caused by your body being constantly in a fight against itself. So when you talk about things like Alzheimer's, what's actually happening, and a lot of the science came from Dr. David Perlmutter, who I have a lot of respect for. His opinion is your body's under attack. That inflammation begins to permeate the blood-brain barrier, develops this inflammation in your brain, which then leads to that amyloid plaque buildup, which then, of course, leads to Alzheimer's. So the idea is that you can prevent those things from happening by just saying, all right, let's get our gut in a better balance and healthier by making sure that we know exactly what to put into our stomachs.
And Jimmy, from a personal level, and perhaps more than most, with you being an athlete, playing in the NFL for the Tennessee Titans and being on the rowing team and Olympic tryouts and all those other kinds of things that you were doing, what have you noticed with your body when, okay, I've dialed it in, I'm eating all the right things, or perhaps I'm not eating the right things, yesterday wasn't a good day. How did you feel that in yourself? And the reason I ask that is sometimes when we get off our North Star health-wise, we forget what it feels like to be healthy. And we wake up and, okay, same blank, different day. And it really isn't. So you being dialed in as a professional athlete and even going through college as an athlete, what's going on with that? What did you notice?
Sure. I think it's interesting when you really have to pay attention to your body. And typically high performing athletes, you're worried about rest, you're worried about recovery, you're worried about the ability to repeat. And that's really the recipe that leads to successful athletes: rest, recover, and repeat. And so when you can do those things, you are able to prime your body for athletic performance. What happens in the professional world, as you said, we forget what feeling good feels because we aren't necessarily as focused and tuned in on our own bodies. So what I've noticed as an athlete, and I'll be totally honest, when I didn't really start attacking the dietary components and really starting to do research until I was pursuing the Olympics and rowing. And it was because I was learning a whole new sport. It was a pretty intense sport. Not the easiest on your body. And you have to be able to train at a very high level, very aggressively, and repeat the next day. And the only way to do that is to be able to rest and recover. And so when your body's not, as I said before, when it's not helping it self to recover, it's going to make it harder to train. So I started to dial in on my diet, one from a fuel perspective, and I started to do this research on how fat can be utilized as fuel. As you said, the standard American diet focuses on the food pyramid, and most people believe fat is bad. And for the most part, that's entirely wrong. Fat calories are burned much slower. When you are fat adaptive, you oftentimes are not feeling those fluctuations in energy like you might when you are on more of the standard American diet, where you burn through all your carbohydrates first and you kind of get this like glucose rush and you start to not feel as good and you don't have as much energy. That's because your body's utilizing all of its fuel very quickly, where fat as fuel is utilized in a much more efficient manner. And so what I started to notice is when you eat properly, then when your body isn't feeling inflamed, it's recovering better and you're able to be primed and refreshed every single day.
And what's interesting, and perhaps you can tell me if I'm on base or off base with this, when you go to popular media or certain sites, they're talking about you should eat this kind of way or that kind of way. And you can have the quote unquote perfect eating regime, but we're all different. Our bodies are different. So what may be perfect for one person may be the absolute worst for another person. What are your thoughts about that?
Sure. That's why we really believe in proper testing at the start before you get your food prescription. The idea is, what a lot of people don't know is healthy food for you may not be healthy food for me. Your results might show that spinach is bad for you. I think we were all raised to believe, generally speaking, that spinach is a pretty healthy food to eat. The problem is it might be generally healthy because it has these vitamins and minerals and your body can absorb it well. But what's actually not taken into account is your body's inflammatory process. Each type of food has its own level of toxicity, and everybody's body responds different to that level of toxicity. So, for example, you could probably eat 10 bags of spinach and it would be too much, and your body would develop an intolerance or some type of allergy to it and say, please don't give me any more spinach. And you would start to get sick. That sick feeling is your body saying, no more, no more. Right. So the idea is that not all food is created equal. Not all healthy food for you is healthy food for me. So the idea is you get proper testing done to be able to provide you the knowledge base to make sure that you're putting the right food into your body. But also our bodies change. And so a lot of the scrutiny that takes place around food sensitivity tests and gut health tests is that what we put into our body constantly changes those results. That in fact is true. However, it's hard to argue that if you get a test done and you start to discover some things that may have been causing some type of inflammatory response, if you remove it, it's going to be healthy for you. It's hard to argue otherwise. So the idea is get a test done probably twice a year. We would continue to go in there and hone in further on it just to be sure that we're becoming more and more precise and just help you get to a more efficient food solution than you might if you're just trying to eliminate a couple of ingredients here and there.
So what we've established, Jimmy, so far is food is medicine. The right kind of food will help the body heal and get to an optimal state. And through that, we'll have the right kind of energy, clarity of thinking, and really being able to do all the things that we want to do. And you've also shared with us from one person to the next, what could be the perfect eating regime for one person could be the absolute worst for another person. So there's some confusion out there because we could be looking at a family member or a friend. Hey, look what they're eating and they're just in the perfect condition. And we go down that path and that's not quite the same. So how does it work now with what you're doing, with the service that you're offering?
Sure. So the way the process works is someone goes online, they decide they want to become a member. They then place their order. They get a kit sent directly to their house. That kit consists of 1 or 2 health test kits, depending on what they decided to proceed with. There's a early dietary guide in there that is a little bit more general in nature. Then there's a journal and some supplements and a few other things in that box. They take the test out. When they complete it, it takes 3 to 5 minutes to complete. They drop it back in the mail. They'll get a ding to their account and to their phone as soon as the results are done. They'll get a pretty detailed report that goes through the interactions that their body has from an inflammatory perspective on hundreds and hundreds of different types of food. And then there's a category that shows eliminate, cycle through, or eat as much as you want of. We take anything that says eliminate or cycle through, and we actually make sure that not one single recipe has those ingredients in it. And then we provide you with that food prescription where you can swap things in and out. And on your patient portal, you're able to go in and say, oh, that ingredient or that recipe is great, but it's good for me, but it's not something I like. So you swap it out. It actually populates a grocery shop list for you. And that way you can take it grocery shopping with you, or you can integrate with your food delivery service to be sure that everything you're getting sent to your house is appropriate for you and for your body. And then you have all the different recipes that are approved with those ingredients that you can cook for yourself as well. So you are able to know that what goes in your body is correct. Something else that's important too is, we're not all cooking and eating alone. In fact, most of us are not. And I believe that one thing that's important with cooking is you get community, you get some type of bonding experience, maybe with your spouse, your kids. So we often see that whole families will do the test. And what we'll do is, although perhaps my test is different than my wife's, we will actually combine all those test results to create the family plan as well, which makes sure that everything that's being put on the table is good for everybody around the table also.
So really, it sounds like it's just a few minutes. It's not evasive. If I'm correct with what I heard you say earlier, through either a stool test or a finger prick for a drop of blood, that's all you need. Pop it in the mail, results come back. And not only are you telling us, go to town on these foods, but stay away from these foods, you're also providing recipes so that we can really do that and incorporate that into our life.
That's right. And then some of the other advancements down the road we'll start to integrate with the food delivery services like a Uber Eats or a DoorDash. It takes a little bit more integration, but the ability to go on and evaluate all the menu items on there and then be able to overlay our test results. So as you scroll through those apps, you'll be able to see what's approved and what's not for you also.
And so, Jimmy, maybe I'm going to open up the Pandora's box here with this next question. What's the science behind that? Maybe for the layperson, what's the science behind all this that, okay, this is good for Jeffrey, this isn't good for Jeffrey? How do you get there?
So with the stool sample, there's full evaluation of all the good and the bad bacteria and the correlation of that bacteria to ingredients. With the finger prick, it is based upon food sensitivity and food allergy. So if you put some type of ingredient in your body, say over the course of the last couple months, we'll be able to evaluate how your body's responding to that from an inflammatory perspective. I think it's important to note, though, that although I do believe, because I've taken probably every single test that's available out there and scoured the country and traveled around and enjoyed doing all of it, in part for research and part because it's fun to experience what other consumers go through. It's fun to talk to the doctors, fun to talk to the scientists. That's all been great. And I think ours is pretty extensive, but our software is set up in somewhat of a lab agnostic way. So if you came to me and said, listen, I like your test, but my doctor says take this test, we say, great, no problem. You can still have access to the software. You can still integrate all of your test results, and you can still create your own food prescription on there as well. So we do that because I think there's many questions that we'll never have complete unanimous consensus on. And I think one of them is going to be whose lab test is better. It doesn't really matter how far down the road we go. There's so many different lab tests out there. I like ours. I've evaluated a number of others. We do have some other third-party lab partners as well that we have partnered with that are leveraging our software. But even though we like our lab results, it doesn't necessarily have to be those, because we know people will argue which one's good and which one's not.
And speaking of that, Jimmy, I know in certain circles, some people would say, okay, an allergy kind of test or a food reactive kind of test really isn't that accurate. Take it with, no pun intended, a grain of salt. Has the science changed with that we can now dial it in for the accuracy with what you're doing?
Yeah. So if you think about where we are in the age of data collection and with machine learning models, we are much more efficient now in the ability to capture data and evaluate the correlation of one piece of data to another. Simply put, the more data that you collect, as long as you've got the proper learning models in place, then the more accurate you're going to be. So for example, on ours, we've got 9 different types of inflammatory markers, and we've got 700 different types of ingredients. So you think about those 700 types of ingredients across those 9 different inflammatory markers, and that's just you, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
thousands and thousands of data points from just you. Now just imagine the fact that we do that with 20,000 people a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of data that we're able to collect, the amount of user feedback we're able to collect will just make those reports smarter and smarter. We've worked with groups like Viome as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really the foundation of what they're doing is they're collecting lots and lots of data,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands of data points on everybody. So their results and their recommendations just become more and more accurate. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same exact model that we have undergone, as well as what most of these food sensitivity testing companies are doing.
And as you're going out across a population and getting all these tests, and now you can have some comparison points, is there AI right now or AI planned down the road to help dial in some of the insights?
Absolutely. So from our perspective, there's a number of different ways to integrate AI into a platform like this. One is from a data collection perspective, as I just talked about, where we
Mm-hmm.
gather more and more data so the recommendations become more and more accurate. The other one is what we would call a recommendation engine.
Mm-hmm.
So that recommendation engine is going to take your particular preferences, how you interact with your food, what you like, what you don't like, your lifestyle. As we learn more and more about you, we'll be able to be smarter about the types of foods that we're recommending, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we may know that you have a habit of traveling during certain seasons. We may understand how you might act on a weekend versus a weekday. You might be training for an Ironman. And those are things that as we learn more and more about you,
Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to make more accurate recommendations for your diet. And I think that's really going to be key to a program like this. I think most diets, generally speaking, are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is adoption and sustainability, right? So it's sure that's great. You can tell me to overhaul my entire lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
but you haven't taken into account the fact that I have a lifestyle that maybe you don't understand. And
Sure.
travel and work and sports and leisure and all those different things are taken into account. So maybe these days of the week I'm cooking and these days of the week I'm eating out.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for us to be able to understand those things about people, to create a proper recommended tool for them that actually works according to their specific lifestyle, or they just simply won't stay on it.
That's fair enough. And without what we're talking about today, it's not medical advice. People should always consult with their health professional and get the right kind of go, no go from their health professional. But let me ask you this. Are there certain kinds of foods across the board, regardless of eating regime, that are just a no-fly zone? Hey, don't go there regardless of how you eat. These particular foods aren't great. You know, outside the obvious sugary kinds of foods or things like that, processed foods. Anything else that really jumps up to the forefront?
Of course, our body is going to, all of our bodies will react differently to different types of foods. But of course, the obvious ones, right? I mean, it's pretty clear what clean eating is and what not clean eating is. And
Mm-hmm.
clean eating is still very different than utilizing food as medicine,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the baseline, right? So as your question earlier talked about, hey, this whey protein is good and this whey protein is not, those for the typical American,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a humorous promotion because the
Mm-hmm.
reality is we're already doing things that we know are bad for us.
Mm-hmm.
So us eating this type of optimal way versus another
Mm-hmm.
is probably not the highest priority for us. But
Mm-hmm.
typically what we're doing is we are refusing to stop some of those things that we may have a little bit more kind of an addictive process towards: the sugars, the third and fourth and fifth drink, as opposed to just the first and second, the extra bite of cake that we can't resist. Those things should be cut out first. There's this whole craze about kale and juicing,
Mm-hmm.
and you see people go and they'll juice kale and they'll have all these healthy drinks, and then what do they do later on in the day, right? They have 6 or 7 margaritas. If you can cut those types of things out first, then you can start to get into some more optimal things. There is definitely, though, I'll answer your question a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
directly. There's definitely some interesting science around protein and how
Mm-hmm.
much protein we actually need. Most of us don't need 50 to 100 grams of protein. Protein is meant to be consumed so you can repair your muscle fibers that have been torn apart during more aggressive workouts. Then when you repair them, they come back stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us are not undergoing that type of intense activity where we need that much protein. So that's something that's interesting. We can actually, all of us can survive pretty well off of, say, 25 to 45 grams of protein in a day, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what a lot of people think is more protein you take in, the more muscle you're going to build.
Sure. So it sounds like it's also relative to your lifestyle and how active you are and what you're doing. Are you building muscle? Or are you just doing leisurely walks or something in between that you can then figure out what makes the most sense?
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right.
And Jimmy, I know it's still early days for you and you're continuing to refine and enhance all the testing and the services. That said, though, are there some early success stories that you can share with us of what you've seen of people, clients who have come up and taken the tests and what you've been able to find for them?
I can give you three different categories. One that we're most excited about is we're working with Advanced Clinic out of the Villages, Florida, and they are helping to treat people with traumatic brain injury, early onset Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And so our partnership with them is really, it consists of how do we prime people and get them ready for treatment?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think something like this can really be effective, where we begin to work with more advanced physicians who have maybe advanced protocols, maybe even things that are a little bit more disruptive to the industry. And
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to prime people and get them ready for treatment. Our idea is utilize food as medicine early on. So when they go into treatment, it's just much more successful. And we're seeing the difference in before and after where our program works well with a treatment like that. And perhaps the outcomes are faster and better. And that's what we're starting to see. Of course, then from a consumer perspective, we're getting a lot of great feedback from emerging athletes and
Mm-hmm.
just athletes in general saying, look, you've taken the guesswork out of this. This is interesting because now our trainers and our physicians and our coaches and those people around us would like to adopt it as well, just from an efficiency perspective. So instead of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, try this and try that. The problem with team sports is you do the same thing that you try to do with the general population. Here you go. Here's the three things everyone here needs to eat. And the challenge in creating those personalized programs has been that can be labor intensive, that can be extensive. We've helped to remove the guesswork for groups like that as well. And then we've got a couple patients who weren't necessarily fighting weight issues, but they were fighting some early onset symptoms of a number of different autoimmune diseases, lupus and MS in particular. And we've seen them at least say, hey, it feels like early on our symptoms have begun to subside. Of course, we'll see what that means to them longer term. And that's also very exciting to us.
And Jimmy, as you're talking about this, and what's exciting, and I'm going to throw a stat out there, and I think it's actually gotten worse because the study has been out there for a few years now. And what it's saying is if you took 10 Americans and you looked at how healthy are they, do they have metabolic disease? I'm going to round up. It's 88%. So let's say 9 out of 10 people have some kind of metabolic disease, and either it's early onset or they're right in the throes of it. They may not even realize it because that's a new normal. They don't know any different. And then the other side I'm going to throw out there, a lot of thought leaders in the medical community are saying that all disease, regardless of where it ends up, starts in the gut. And would love to hear your thoughts on both those stats.
Sure. I didn't know the 9 out of 10 stat. That's interesting. It's high, but not surprising. The comments about people being on board that the large majority of disease states starts in the gut is exactly how we feel. We think there's actually science, and we did publish a paper on this, that there's science that shows that 90% of all autoimmune diseases can be directly correlated back to the gut. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have a predisposition. It doesn't mean that perhaps you could have done a whole lot to maybe prevent some of these other diseases. Maybe there's family history around it. But typically what you see is you see a genetic predisposition and an unhealthy gut. And oftentimes you can maybe help those symptoms subside. Like, for example, we have Alzheimer's that we have a fortunate family history where we haven't had a lot of health issues, but Alzheimer's has been one of them. I carry the APOE4 gene, but I believe wholeheartedly that with proper diet, those symptoms I'll probably never experience them. And you see the same thing with heart disease. You see the same thing with diabetes. You can at least help those symptoms to subside. So our idea is simple. It's you help your body work for itself, not against itself, by being sure that what you put into your mouth and that ultimately ends up in your gut is proper for you. And if you're doing those things, then at least your body can work hard to fight off some of those disease states that you may possibly be more susceptible to than others.
And for our listeners, I'm going to put a pause for just a moment for my next question, just to put this in perspective. What Jimmy and I are talking about, you may say, wait a minute, I thought this is a business podcast, a Deep Wealth podcast. How to grow my business? How do I increase my enterprise value? Have a great liquidity event? And it really is, because if you're going to grow your business, if you're going to be in a liquidity event, you have to be top of your game, mental clarity. You have to have the energy to achieve those goals and to put in some of those hours that are going to be needed. But if you're feeling lethargic or tired all the time, or you're thinking it's foggy instead of it's clear as mud, not clear as crystal, that's a problem. Your business is going to suffer. Your team is going to suffer. So what we're talking about really is a foundation of not just a successful personal life, but also a business life. And the two are really one and the same. So with that in mind, Jimmy, we may go down a rabbit hole here. I'll try and keep it as top level as we can. In certain health circles, what's been coming up more frequently these days are some funny terms for most people. They may not have heard of it. Lectins and oxalates as it pertains to vegetables. And when you think about vegetables, unlike an animal, if we're hunting an animal, that animal can run, it can move. Plants can't do that. So they developed their own defense mechanisms through oxalates and lectins. So when another animal is eating a plant, the oxalates and lectins will have the animal feel sick. It's like a mild poison, or it could be a severe poison. So when you fast forward now to humans, and we can take some of your earlier examples, spinach or kale, which people think, hey, that could be the healthiest food around. What's wrong with having bags and bags of kale or spinach? But they're both high in oxalates and lectins. And so when you're going through your food recommendations and you're doing the testing through the stool and the blood prick, do you take into account oxalates and lectins in your recommendations?
We do, and it's in a little bit more of a kind of 1 degree of separation removed manner, because we're testing the exact, your body's exact sensitivity to exact types of foods. And some of those likely will include the food that contains lectins. So what actually happens, because your body isn't necessarily equipped to digest food that contains lectins, and primarily, let's say, beans, for example. So as your body digests beans, what actually takes place is you consume those beans or the type of food that contains lectins, your body feels it coming through. So actually it starts to activate that inflammatory process. Typically that inflammatory process is in the form of mucus, so digestive mucus, and that digestive mucus is what's actually causing that discomfort. To help it pass through your digestive systems, you can properly digest it without it causing too much quote unquote harm. And there's certain things you can do to remove lectins, say from beans, like, cook them in a pressure cooker. There's some different techniques out there, but that's typically what's happening. So when you ask specifically about, say, food that contains lectins, and do we test for that, we would test the response that your body has to those foods. And that 1 degree of separation is most likely a lot of those foods do contain byproducts like lectins that might be causing that inflammatory process.
What I really like about this, it's almost like you've unlocked the magic genie in the bottle for us, because otherwise, left to our own devices, we have to test this on our own. And the challenge with foods, and Jimmy, correct me if I'm not correct with this, we could eat something today, but we won't feel it for 2 or 3 days later. Maybe we become bloated, or we're just feeling off. And it's not from what we ate today, it's from a few days ago. Very difficult to do unless you're logging all your food. And even then, it's a best guess. And so really, you're taking the heavy lifting away from us. You're doing it on the back end, proven science, proven results across gazillions of tests that you've been doing for people and continue to do. And you're really giving us our own private playbook. Here are the foods that you can thrive on, and perhaps some recommendations. Okay, you can probably be okay on these foods, but you may want to think about them and perhaps steer away to these other foods. How am I doing with that?
No, that's right. That's the simplest way to put it. And if you have a test that you prefer over ours, okay, we recommend that everyone at least undergo our test. It's an extensive panel that you get back. Just takes a couple minutes to complete. Ultimately, yes, that's the best summary of it. It's just as simple as, not only do you get good results back so you can educate yourself, but we're helping to close the loop by giving people not just information, but ultimately a guide that helps them to understand exactly what to do with their results. And that removes the guesswork for people. And so then from a adoption perspective, it's easier. And then from a sustainability perspective, the idea is for us to continue to build out tools to accommodate to your particular lifestyle. And that's where, as you talked about, the AI model comes into play. So we've got to understand that one person might be training for an Ironman and one person just wants to feel a little healthier. One person might travel a lot. One person might not. One person may have to, eat out 5 days a week. One person may not. And so those are different things that from a sustainability perspective, it's important that we understand people's lifestyles and begin to offer recommendations specific to their lifestyles also.
And how powerful is that? Because if I know, okay, next week I have a lot of business meetings, or I'm going to be traveling extensively, with the information, with the science behind what you're doing, with your recommendations. Okay, Jeffrey, when you're traveling, here's where you want to look for in terms of the kinds of foods that you want to have. And once you integrate with some of the food delivery services, I imagine it'll be as simple as point and click and boom, the right kind of meal shows up for me that's going to keep me out of the hospital bed and really more in a primal health kind of thriving, prosperous area. How am I doing with that?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. And we like the idea of partnering with physicians, hospitals. We are, even for example, groups like the American Diabetes Association. The idea is, how do you give them more detailed tools to help them focus on their specific initiatives as well? And it's really hard to argue that diet isn't a core component of almost every health issue and problem out there that we're trying to solve. Whether it's the core issue or not, that is obviously debatable, but it's hard to argue that eating right isn't going to put you in a healthier state.
And for our listeners, what's powerful, what's exciting about this, why do the guesswork? So in your personal life, as an example, you want to start working out. Are you doing that on your own, or did you hire a coach or a trainer? Or when it comes time for your taxes to be done, are you doing those on your own? Are you opening up the books? Let me learn how to do these taxes. Or are you going to accountants? Are you having bookkeepers? So why should it be any different for really something I would say is the most important? It's taking care of ourselves first, putting our health first, and being the beneficiary of that. And I suspect, Jimmy, as people, when they take the few minutes, that's all it takes, they do the test, they send it in, the kinds of foods that they should stay away from, or the kinds of foods that they thought they should be staying away from, but actually, no, these are good for me. I suspect that's a huge game changer. Any success stories on that side of people who have reached out? Hey, I was staying away from this because I thought it was bad. I heard so-and-so talk about this in some social media channel, and actually my body thrives on that. Thank you. What's that sounding like for you?
I think it's funny because a lot of people are scared of the results. They're like, oh, I love, red meat and I love, XYZ foods. And then they're afraid those foods will be on there. Sometimes they are, but at least you have the knowledge, right? And ignorance is not bliss when it comes to proper diet. So we often give people the encouragement too that sometimes cycling off those foods means that you can cycle back on them later on. So continuing to do the proper testing is important. But yes, you're spot on there on your description. Some of the interesting, we'll call them happy stories from people is they'll get their results back and they'll say, oh, I thought I was gluten intolerant, for example. And of course, I think generally speaking, removing gluten from your diet is good. But for example, for me, it makes no difference. I have a gluten intolerance. I have a sensitivity to it. So great. And that often is something that can be a pleasant surprise for people.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, because we can keep on going down these different areas and they're exciting. We're going to go into wrap-up mode, and I have the privilege or the honor to ask my favorite question for all of the guests. Let me set this up for you, Jimmy. It's a fun one. So think of the movie Back to the Future. And in the movie, you have that magical DeLorean car that will take you to any point in time. So the fun part is tomorrow morning, and Jimmy, you look outside your window, not only is the DeLorean car curbside, the door is open and is waiting for you to hop on in, which you do. So you're now going to go to any point in your life. Jimmy, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what would you tell your younger self in terms of life wisdom, life lessons, or, hey, Jimmy, do this, but don't do that? What would that sound like?
Sure. So how far back would I go? I think we'd go back as far as we can, where we understand the decisions that we were making made a real lasting impact. And what's interesting is the advice I give to myself is some of it's from lessons learned, but some of it is just from being around people like you and other business leaders who have taught me things. And I think that there's a couple of things I really, really enjoy and try to live by. So if there's an opportunity in front of you, always take it. I think that we have tried to learn to be proper and selective with our time,
Mm-hmm.
that's well and good. I think, of course, you only have X amount of time in a day, so you got to properly prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
But something, say, even like a podcast or a
Mm-hmm.
show or an interview, or someone puts an article right in front of you that says you need to read this, do it. So I think that you always have the chance to learn more and more from that perspective. The next one, of course, is relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have focused on that over the course of the last 15 years of my career. Is like, for example, when we're done here, Jeffrey, I'll have some notes by your name. I'll have your show on there. I'll probably try to have a couple personal notes on there about you as well. And I try to scan through that at least once a week. It's an extensive list now. And I'm constantly reaching out to people to check up on them, see how things are going, take an interest in their life, a true interest. And that's something that I wish I'd have started doing earlier on. I think through my sports career, whether it was in college or professionally, all the different people that I've come across that I have good memories with, and maybe through social media, I can drop them a quick note, but I don't have that more extensive relationship that I wish I would have. And so I think dating back to those times where you come across that first interesting person, I would say just keep in touch with those people, try to network, and just build true, meaningful, lasting relationships with lots of people throughout your life.
What a terrific strategy of just making it real and having a tribe and staying in touch and being present with them. Even if it's a quick, hey, I was thinking of you. How's this last time we spoke, or how's that? I absolutely love that. And Jimmy, let me ask you this before we go into wrap up mode now. Is there any other question or topic that perhaps I didn't ask that I should have asked, or that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. I know the typical theme for this, for your show, has been about exits and liquidity events. I will note that I have had the luxury of going through a couple. Those are fun experiences. And I think that if I could offer any potential advice on those, and of course you already offer the advice of you've got to be thinking optimally and clearly. I think a few things for those that haven't been through them before. There's probably nothing more disruptive to your business than trying to go through a liquidity event. You get to start to focus on, okay, how do we get this deal done? You're focused on past numbers. You're focused on some forecasting. But at some point in time, if those deals don't wrap up, you start to underperform, more and more doubt starts to get instituted. Those liquidity events can be very disruptive and distracting, kind of the whole dog and pony show. So my advice there is just stay true to your business. Don't let somebody else navigate it. Don't let an underwriter start to ask those skeptical questions and force you to start to change the business principles that have helped you get to that point. Those were some things that we were fortunate to not learn the hard way, but we could have had we not tried to stick to those. And the other thing is just in terms of starting businesses, I know people like to ask, what's your exit plan early on? And we've all got to come to the realization that we have dreams and aspirations of what those can look like. But the reality of those looking exactly like you wanted them to on day one are quite unlikely. And I typically like to try to focus on just what's the first 90 days look like? What does success mean here? And then start to carry it from there and kind of do those checkpoints along the way. And the very last piece of advice is I like to invite people to, as I say, watch the movie. So I'll get in touch with people very early on and say, this is what I'm launching. I'd love for you to stay involved in this one way or another. All that means for you now is just read my updates once a quarter, and I'll start to show you some of those successes. As we start to build trust, maybe you'll have an interest in investing or helping us to exit this company down the road.
Some terrific insights, and Jimmy, you're spot on in everything that you said. And for our listeners, Jimmy's actually really modest. We could have another episode, and perhaps we should do that, Jimmy, just on your business success and what you've done in the business world and the success that you've achieved. To one of your points, though, you can fill in the word, whether it's universe, God, creator, whatever. If you want to make the universe or God laugh, share your plans. And that's typically where that goes. But let me ask you this, and for our listeners, it'll be easy. It's all in the show notes. It'll be a point and click. Jimmy, if someone wants to learn more, they want to take the test, or they have a question for you, they want to become a client, where's the best place online for them to go?
Sure. So they can email me directly at jimmy@alirx.health. So that's ALIRX.health. You can find us on LinkedIn. And of course, our URL is alirx.health as well. So feel free to contact us there, and feel free to email me directly or find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with you.
It does not get any better. Jimmy was very generous putting himself out there with his email. Take him up on that. Send him a question. Take the test. Become a client. You do this today, you'll be thanking yourself tomorrow. Jimmy, it's official. This is a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much for your strategies, your insights, and your wisdom today.
Great. Thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed the time with you.
The Deep Wealth experience was definitely a game changer for me.
This course is one of the best investments you will ever make because you will get an ROI of 100 times that. Anybody who doesn't go through it will lose millions.
If you don't have time for this program, you'll never have time for a successful liquidity.
I mean, it was the best value of any business course I've ever taken. The money was very well spent.
Compared to when we first began, today I feel better prepared, but in some respects, maybe less prepared, not because of the course, but because the course brought to light so many things that I thought we were on top of that we need to fix.
I 100% believe there's never a great time for a business owner to allocate extra hours into his or her week or day. So it's an investment that will yield results today. I thought I will reap the benefit of this program in 3 to 5 years down the road. But as soon as I stepped forward into the program, my mind changed immediately.
There was so much value in the experience that the time I invested paid back so much for the energy that was expended.
The Deep Wealth experience compared to other programs is the top. What we learned is very practical. Sometimes you learn stuff that is great to learn, but you never use it. The stuff we learned from Deep Wealth experience, I believe is going to benefit us both.
I've done an executive MBA. I've worked for billion-dollar companies before. I've worked for smaller companies before I started my business. I've been running my business successfully now for getting close to a decade. We're on a growth trajectory. Reflecting back on the Deep Wealth, I knew less than 10% what I know now. Maybe close to 1% even.
Hands down the best program in which I've ever participated. And we've done a lot of different things over the years. We've been in other mastermind groups, gone to many seminars, workshops, conferences, retreats, read books. This was so different. I haven't had an experience that's anything close to this in all the years that we've been at this. It's 5-star, A+.
I would highly recommend it to any super busy business owner out there. And Deep Wealth is an accurate name for it. This program leads to deeper wealth and happier wealth, not just deeper wealth. I don't think there's a dollar value that could be associated with such an experience and knowledge that could be applied today and forever.
Are you leaving millions on the table? Please visit www.deepwealth.com/success to learn more. If you're not on my email list, you'll want to be. Sign up at www.deepwealth.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, if it added value, if you walked away with some new insights and strategies, please leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Reviews help us reach new listeners, grow the show, and continue to create content that you'll enjoy. And as we wrap up this episode, as always, please stay healthy and safe.